mean, apparently for Jennifer, I didn't do the visual live. I only got the audio live, which is too bad because, frankly, she's a pretty nice-looking woman. But we have, I still have it. I mean, I really need, I really need to get my act together in terms of doing this. Sometimes there's so many buttons to push that I don't always get the right button. So I apologize for that. But anyway, I want to read Jeff's article. He posted it on the WRKO website. Liberal totalitarianism. Democrats seek to criminalize Trump supporters. Now, let me just preface this by noting that right after President Trump was elected in 2016, Massachusetts attorney, and I'm in Massachusetts, Jeff is as well, WRKO, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey created a hotline for people to drop a dime on Trump supporters. And it lasted for a few days. There was such an outcry over it. It was so outrageous and so ridiculous that she took it down. Well, maybe she took it down, but the sentiment remained and the phenomena continues. And I think that Jeff lays this out in his article, which was published today at the WRKO website. You could go there and just put in Jeff Kuhner, Kuhn as in Nancy, ER. And I'm going to read it. And then maybe we'll take some calls. Liberal totalitarianism. Democrats seek to criminalize Trump supporters. The enemy is within, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi thundered. This is what many leading Democrats and liberals now believe. And who exactly are these enemies? You guessed it, Trump supporters and conservatives. Radical Democrats are planning to wage a domestic war on terrorism, turning nearly half the country into potential political terrorists. If this sounds like an exaggeration, simply check out House Resolution 350, the liberals' equivalent of the Patriot Act Redux. This time, however, it is not aimed at Islamic jihadists. Rather, it directly targets Trump patriots. The storming of the Capitol building on January 6th has been cynically and dangerously exploited by the left to tar all Trump's voters as, quote, domestic terrorists, unquote, insurrectionists, seditionists, traitors, and of course, white supremacists. H.R. 350 has the full backing of the Democratic congressional leadership, the Biden administration, including Dementia Joe himself, big media, and big tech. If the bill is passed, then the United States will become a police state. The proposed law urges an internal war on domestic extremists, quote unquote, similar to the war on Al-Qaeda and Islamists following the 9/11 terrorist attack. It calls for U.S. intelligence agencies, the Department of Homeland Security, and the FBI to target Trump conservatives, especially those who believe the 2020 election was stolen and Biden is an illegitimate president. The bill empowers the deep state to monitor, surveil, and spy on American citizens' social media accounts, phone calls, political meetings, and even infiltrate pro-Trump or stop the steal rallies. Conservatives who are deemed potentially seditious or treasonous can be arrested and jailed, fined and or lose their employment. The goal is simple: to crush all dissent to the Biden regime. What is shocking is how angry and bloodthirsty for revenge the Democrats are. Think about it. They control the White House and both chambers of Congress. Yet instead of celebrating and trying to pass their progressive agenda, they are hell-bent on destroying Trump and his supporters. Former CIA Director John Brennan insists that in the wake of the Capitol riot, Trump voters pose an existential threat to American democracy. Hence, this is why the country needs a Patriot Act 2.0. This time, however, directly going after American and America First conservatives. And this threat from domestic violence, quote, and this threat from domestic violence extremists is much more challenging, I believe, than it was in terms of going after foreign terrorists, Brennan said on CNN. The domestic violent extremists are much more pervasive. Their numbers are much larger. Unlike Al-Qaeda, for example, Brennan believes there are tens of millions of domestic terrorists here in the United States, in particular, those who oppose Joe Biden and legally own guns, have the weapons, quote, have the weapons that if they choose to use them, they can in fact carry out these deadly attacks, unquote. Brennan may be stupid and a political thug, but he speaks for many in our ruling class. According to their twisted, unhinged worldview, Trump supporters who champion the Second Amendment are enemies of the state. There are many others on the left who share this pathological hatred of conservatives and Republicans. Take Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the darling of progressive Democrats. She not only backs H.R. 350, the Marxist Latina wants congressional Republicans put on a terrorist watch list. Why? Because she believes GOP leaders, such as House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, are neo-Nazi white supremacists who secretly want to murder Democrats, including her. There are legitimate white supremacist sympathizers that sit at the heart and at the core of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives, Ocasio-Cortez said in an interview on MSNBC. There's no consequences for racism, no consequences for messaging, no consequences for insurrection, and no consequences means that they condone it. She added, we are now away from acting out of fealty to the president that they had in the Oval Office, and now we are talking about fealty to white supremacist organizations as a political tool. Notice AOC didn't point to any specific white supremacist group the GOP allegedly supports. This is because there isn't any. AOC and her fellow anti-Trump leftists are peddling insane hatred as a fantasy, a dark fantasy. But the left is now in power, and liberals are laying the groundwork for a progressive authoritarian regime. Eugene Robinson, a leading columnist for the Washington Post, recently said on MSNBC that there are millions of Americans, almost all white, almost all Republicans, who somehow need to be deprogrammed, quote unquote. For good measure, Robinson said, it's as if they are members of a cult, the Trumpist cult, and they have to be deprogrammed, unquote. This orgy of hate and intolerance is being repeated like a drumbeat from the New York Times to the Washington Post to CNN and MSNBC to Hollywood and Silicon Valley to corporate America and Wall Street to universities and Ivy League colleges and ultimately the Democratic Party. In short, by commanding heights of culture, the commanding heights of culture want to suppress, censor, and ban conservatives who dare to challenge liberal orthodoxy. They are deliberately dehumanizing and delegitimizing an entire class of people based on their political beliefs. They are engaging in the most sweeping and brazen assault on the civil liberties in American history. And the reason is obvious. The Democrats are petrified of the truth, and the truth is that they, aided and abetted by the fake news media and big tech oligarchs, committed rampant voter fraud to steal the election from Donald Trump. This is why they fear and loathe Trump supporters. The Biden regime is based on electoral theft and a pack of lies. It is illegitimate to its core. This is why the ruling class needs and wants to criminalize conservatives and any form of dissent. Having attained power fraudulently, the regime must lash out at its opponents in a desperate attempt to silence, bully, and intimidate them. Declaring war on your own population and political enemies is not only despicable and grotesque, it is dangerous and totalitarian. This new domestic war on terrorism will tear the fabric of our country apart. It must be stopped immediately. Biden may have promised unity. Instead, he may give us the very opposite. So, that is Jeff Kuhner's fantastic column. Liberal totalitarianism, Democrats seek to criminalize Trump supporters. The reference here is to House Resolution 350. We ought to keep an eye on that. I call on good, well-meaning conservatives and liberals to reject this. This is not becoming a free society. This is not American. Anyway, I'm going to have, I've got two other guests coming on the program, one of whom is a Canadian educator who has written an illustrated book for children on the George Floyd murder as a way to heighten awareness of racism. I may not agree with some of her conclusions, but we're going to talk about that type of education in schools. You know, I think it's safe to say she's coming at this from the left. And my intention is to conduct an interesting and respectful dialogue with this author. She's coming on with me live at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to join for one quick phone call here, 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. What is on your mind this afternoon? You're welcome to join me. I just read this very powerful essay by Jeffrey Kuhner, who is a talk show host on WRKO. Hope to have him actually join me on this program to talk about it. And when I say that, and as I read that column, I have to tell you, I am concerned that I am going to be yanked off the air any minute. Already, I was notified yesterday that YouTube has demonetized my channel. That hurts, but you know, that's what the world we're in. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for joining me. Hello.
Hey, Chuck, it's Paul. How are you?
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
That was a great article you just read.
Yes.
My big question is this. Now that you've read that, do you still support the Biden administration as you said you were earlier, or do you feel that now that you have a better understanding that it's almost a war against conservatives, which is really nationalism?
Well, first of all, I never supported the Biden administration. I simply recognized that when Biden and Harris were inaugurated, he is the president of the United States and Harris is the vice president of the United States. That doesn't mean that I support them. I don't.
I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Support, I don't mean support. I meant recognize. Do you still
yes,
recognize?
I do recognize. Yes, I do. Because
can you explain that specifically? Because I'm confused.
Sure. Because our system requires that every 4 years we inaugurate a new administration, or if one is reelected, even then it's still a new administration. And on January 20th at 12 noon, that was the administration that was inaugurated. However it happened, and I do question the means, it happened. So I recognize that because I believe, I'm not an anarchist. I believe that we have a system. Now, once that has happened, I certainly will, and I have done everything that is at my disposal to try to call it into question, to try to, to make sure this doesn't happen again, to oppose it in every way I can when they're wrong. And that seems to be in most cases, not all. But they are the government. He is the president. Yeah, I recognize that.
Okay, so here's my first question. What would have to happen in order for you not to continue to recognize this administration? Camps, or what level would this have to get to in order for you to say, okay, I can't respect it anymore. This isn't an administration. This isn't the Constitution and everything that goes along with that. What would have to happen? Because it seems to me that it's pretty bad. So what
would have to happen is that the administration would have had to have performed an act that was unconstitutional to the point at which they would be brought up on articles of impeachment. They would be impeached. They would be convicted, and they would be removed from office. That's how our system works. The Constitution has in place a process by which an administration and a president can be impeached. So what would have to happen is the president would have to be impeached.
So let's say that the Congress is controlled by the House and the Senate as it is, and they're doing things. The president is doing things where in any normal situation he would be impeached, but the Democrats are sort of, these globalist Democrats are sort of behind him. So you're saying that there's not, so if 50.
Yeah. Are you there, Paul? Okay, we seem to have lost Paul. Look, what I would say is that I support the system as it exists. And I believe that the system provides for articles of impeachment if a president, or for that matter, if a judge, or if anyone engages in articles that would warrant that, high crimes and misdemeanors, treason, other articles that are in the Constitution. And I guess that Paul was asking that if such articles were prevented by enough people in Congress who supported this, well, at that point, I hope and pray we don't come to that, but something we very well might. I don't know quite how to answer that. Hello, you're on the air. Hello. Thank you for calling. Speak up when you're ready. All right, we just lost them. I don't know what's going on. Am I having a problem with my Skype? I don't know. Who knows? I'm going to try it again. Hello, you're on the air. Yes, thank you for calling.
I'm sorry, Chuck, I got disconnected. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay, Paul. Anyway, to answer your question, that's a good question. There's no easy answer. You're saying that if there were enough people in the House and the Senate that would refuse to impeach a president who had been involved in high crimes and misdemeanors, what do we do?
Correct.
And, I don't know. At that point, maybe we do have to take, extraordinary measures as a people. At that point, it does raise the question of whether or not we are still a self-governing people. It would be very troubling. I hope we don't get to that. I could see that we very well might. I just don't know how to answer that question. I'm all about the law, and I want to see, the Constitution observed. So I don't want to be hypocritical about that. But I guess you're saying if there are enough of our elected officials who are going to abrogate the Constitution, what do we do? That's a tough question to answer. I don't have an answer.
Do you think we're there already?
No.
Do you think with speech and, oh, really? You don't think we're there already?
Not quite, but we're moving in that direction. Right now, look, the way fascism works, and I'm going to be releasing another short book on this topic. Hopefully by next week. I'm doing like a series of short books. This one
You're like Stephen King. You're like Stephen King, Chuck. You're spitting them out every week.
Oh, well, I'm trying to do it. My goal is to do these short, kind of like almost pamphlets, no more than 10,000 words. My first one is called "We Are All Socialists Now: A Deplorable Looks at the 2020 Election." This new one is going to be called "Toward Nazi America," in which I talk about what's happening in this administration. So, I'm trying to stay abreast of it. I'm trying to stay on top of it. I do believe that we're moving in that direction. And, it hasn't actually happened yet. The way fascism works, whether it be Nazi or Italian fascism, is that the government oligarchs, usually headed up by either a strongman dictator or by like a group of like a junta, works in hand in glove with select corporations, and they kind of run the show. The select corporations get monopoly powers in exchange for protection from the government, which they also protect. It's kind of a collusion. And in Italy, this was formalized in that the Mussolini had what's called a council of corporations, as opposed to a parliament or a Congress. This also happened in Nazi Germany after the Reichstag fire, when the Nazis suspended the Reichstag and they replaced it with select corporations like Krupp and others, and IG Farben, and they kind of ran the government. Is that what's happening in this country? I would argue that we are moving in that direction, that one of the reasons why big tech was able to take down Parler and censor President Trump and remove him from Twitter is because they knew that the new incoming Biden administration wouldn't stop them from doing that there would be no Congress that would stop them from doing it. And that gets very close to a fascist style collusion between certain select private corporations and government oligarchs. So yeah, I think we are moving in that direction.
Do you think nation states even exist anymore? Do you think that? Do you feel there's even a United States anymore? Do you feel that? Don't you feel the world is a college of corporations, as Ned Beatty keenly said in the movie Network in 1979? That it's that. I mean, what is a nation? I mean, do we even have a nation? I mean, who owns our assets? Who owns our forest land? Who owns our resources? I mean, I don't know if you ever read Chomsky's Understanding Power, and there's a lot of things I don't like Chomsky, what he says, but there's a lot of good things he says. He says the idea of the United States, to even call it a country anymore, between the corporations that own everything and the people that own assets. I mean, is there even a United States anymore, Chuck?
Yes, I think there is still a United States. I think that there is a war.
Is it? What is the United States?
Well, the United States
besides the colonized population, what is it?
The United States is people like you and I, and it's sovereign citizens under God. It is enough people who still are conscious and awake and are aware of what freedom is, and they're at war against us. You know, you have a combination of domestic and international corporations and domestic and international oligarchies that have really taken the high ground of power, particularly since, I mean, I mark the demarcation date as the election of 1912 and the election of Wilson, who was the first openly socialist president. At that year, you had direct taxation. You had the Senate would be directly elected, which made them represent the federal government. You had the Federal Reserve Act, so that therefore you had a cartel of private bankers deciding the value of our currency as opposed to Congress. You had a bunch of other things that moved us in the direction of, plus you had World War I, which was a whole interesting subject. You know, we began to see a process by which powers of government were transferred from elected officials who were responsible to their electorate to unelected officials, bureaucracies, judges, international organizations like NGOs and the United Nations, the WTO, you know, the WHO, all of these international groups that suddenly took on governing powers. And that also happened on the state level and even on the local level. And so, yeah, we're at war against that, but they don't control everything. We still have sovereignty under God. It is still one of these underlying internecine struggles. We're doing it right now. No, I don't think, I think there still is a United States. I think that this election is a very dangerous one in that it represents not only a return to this international order where we're involved in perpetual war and interlocking directorates with other nations, but we still, you know, we're still here. We still have the right to to function. We still have the Constitution. We just need to learn. We have to learn how to use it. We have to learn how to employ it and talk about it.
Did you see Klaus Schwab's been giving speeches lately on how there's going to be massive blackouts coming soon? It's going to be some kind of cyber attack, which, God knows where that's going to be coming from. I think things are going to be, I think more strains of coronavirus are going to be coming out. I think blackouts are going to be coming out. I think there's going to be some very scary times ahead, Chuck. What do you think?
I agree. In fact, my guest just now, Jennifer Kearns, I don't know if you heard any of that, but
I didn't.
Okay, but she talked
I'll
about,
listen later.
Yeah, she talked about one of the executive orders that Biden signed in his first day in office, which basically means that the United States is rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. One of the little codicils to that agreement is that the American power grid is now open for foreign involvement and investment, which means China. And there are some other little pieces of information salted into that executive order that are very troubling. Now, you're talking about the Great Reset. I think that the conference that they held in Davos earlier this year, where Schwab was one of the major architects, that was briefly online. It went viral, and then they deleted it. And
I saw that.
Yeah, and it's something. I had Jay Dyer on the show talk about that, and he's an expert on that. And it's where they are. I mean, it's the new warmed over version of international socialism. I mean, there's no question about that. We're dealing with it, and the fact that they, you're saying that they're going to be introducing new strains of, or there will be new strains of coronavirus and blackouts. I don't doubt that. I mean, there already are new strains. They're already talking about that.
Chuck, I'm almost 50. I know you're a little bit older than I am. Don't you feel sorry for these kids today who don't get to see the world that we grew up in? It's so sad.
It is a big problem. I can speak to this, personally, some people in my own life. It's like they don't know what the hell is going on. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's so, they have captured education and they've captured the media and the means of communication so thoroughly, and they have used it as a conveyor belt for left-wing propaganda. And, I mean, everything now is being censored. I mean, some of my books, I've written over 15 nonfiction books. And when I started writing, really around, 2010, 2011, things were a little more free, and Wikipedia back then was a little bit more reliable, and I could find information that I wanted to get. Now you can't. Everything has been taken down. I mean, you look at Wikipedia, it's completely, propaganda. It's totally, you can't find anything anymore. It's all on the left. It's all like disappeared down a gigantic vortex. And it's very frightening. And when I look at it now, as I try to continue with my writing, I can see that it's gotten really difficult to get things out. So it's very troubling.
Yeah, I live in New England too, Chuck. I live in the Connecticut shoreline. And all my nieces and nephews, they tell me they're in high school how there's literally cultural Marxism in every single class. This and that. It's insane.
Oh, it's permeated everything, and everything now. One of the manifestations of it is that everybody is focused on race identity, and that everything comes down to that. And it's all that anyone who is not white is oppressed, and it's an extremely negative view. A really skewed perspective. It doesn't recognize, that there are great opportunities for everyone right now, particularly, I would suggest, people of color who are achievers, that this isn't this negative anti-American view. And I think that a lot of this is being rigged up as a way of denouncing this country.
Divide and conquer, Chuck, the oldest trick in the book.
All right, Paul, listen, thanks for calling.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So I'm going to wrap it up at this point, and thank you all for joining me. I'm going to be returning in about an hour with Michael Shaw, who's a regular guest of mine. And so please stay tuned for that. Thank you very much. Thank you, TikTok. And there we go. Oh, good.
It is, and they're doing things.
Homeland Security and the FBI to target Trump conservatives, especially those who believe the 2020 election was stolen and Biden is an illegitimate president. The bill empowers the deep state to monitor, surveil, and spy on American citizens' social media accounts, phone calls, political meetings, and even infiltrate pro-Trump or stop the steal rallies. Conservative I don't think I caught any of that. Did I get it at least from Periscope? Did I get it on Twitch? Who is the co-creator of VPN's Bullet Point Nation with Fox News. He's a regular news regular, Michael, with Fox News regular. No, I didn't get any of it. Oh, so good. Did he come? Can we put back that piece? Yeah. Okay, we should put it back. No, I think we have a good piece. Yeah, that's fine. Where's it leaving?
Just think for a minute. It's stupid. Just think for a minute. He's trying to tell you. Squeeze up your
We'll have to get tools.
So nice. It's fine, Jeff.
What's that?
Why do you think it's not good?
I think it's fine.
We haven't
It doesn't seem to have the power that it has before.
Well, we have a sprayer.
Well, maybe that's why it's divided.
Why do this so
Yeah.
quickly? Yes.
Maybe that's why.
What?
Maybe that's why. Really? Yeah, what do you want me to do, dear?